Today's webinar is all about an introduction to the Maths Mastery programme. As we go through, do please use that Q&A function and a member of our team will respond to you and be able to go through any questions that you might have as we go through this webinar. And then you can see that email address we've got at the bottom. Please do use that if you've got any further questions or you'd like to have some more information as we go through. So just to kick us off, I'll just give you a few moments to read through our vision and mission of Maths Mastery and ACP. So at the core of our programme, this is what we believe in and ultimately is what we're working towards. We realise it's quite an ambitious vision, but we've seen it happening and we believe that it works in the schools that we work with and we think it's possible. So we want every child in every school to not only succeed in maths, but to really enjoy it. We want that feeling that maths is pupils' favourite lesson. When they know they've got a maths lesson, they get really excited and we get that great feedback through the pupil voices as well. In order to achieve this, we need to make sure that we're empowering and we're equipping teachers to be able to deliver world-class maths. And actually, we don't just want the pupils enjoying maths, we want teachers enjoying maths as well and feeling like they're having a lasting difference and change with the maths education that they provide. So a little bit about us. Everyone who works in the Maths Mastery primary team have been a primary school teacher or a maths lead at some point. We have experience of all the challenges that face teachers and maths leads on a daily basis, and we're best placed, therefore, to be able to overcome those. Now, in terms of the programme itself, we're tried and tested in hundreds of schools. To give you an idea of where the schools are that we work with, we've just got a bit of a map there of the schools that we work with across the UK, but actually we also have schools internationally from Sweden to Vietnam to Ecuador as well. We started in 2012 with just 3 primary schools within the ART network, and we've now grown to around 370 schools across the UK. We're continuing to grow and develop. And in order to do so, it's about working really closely with schools. This programme is always evolving. We're always trying to improve as a programme, working with the experts, working with researchers, but also working really closely with our schools to get their feedback to make it even better as well. In terms of impact, some of the stats that Maths Mastery has, every year we send out an annual summer survey, and these are some of the findings that we got from last year. We're really proud of the satisfaction rate that comes back to us year on year, but also the Education Endowment Fund, the EEF, also completed an evaluation in Key Stage 1 in our schools and found that pupils are making, on average, around 2+ months additional progress in every year compared to schools that are not using our programme. So again, that's something that we're really proud of, is it shows that we're having that lasting impact on pupils' learning. So a really key question, well, what is Maths Mastery? So first off, we can see here that we have got, get that links up, we've got Helen Drury, who is our director there, and she's a member of the drafting panel for the new national curriculum, which was in 2014. Now, mastery is a word which you'll hear quite commonly bandied around a lot today. There's a lot of definitions of what mastery looks like. You'll see as you read through that slide, this is what we think of as our definition of what mastery looks like. And this really is a good kind of window into what we're trying to do and what the Maths Mastery programme aims to do as much as possible. Mastery might happen at different points depending on what the learning is you're doing. It might happen at the end of the unit, at the end of a term, at the end of a year group, or it might be something that you continue to develop and continue to master as you work on something. It's all part of that lifelong journey that we want to develop in terms of maths learning. Now, in order to be able to achieve that mastery, we have our underpinning principles. We call these our dimensions of depth. Now, our dimensions of depth are things that aren't just there as like a pretty little diagram to show people. They're something that is a really lived thing in every lesson we go into. I work with lots of schools now, and when I go into schools and into classrooms, I'm looking for these dimensions of depth and opportunities for every pupil to develop these dimensions of depth in every lesson that we go into. Where they came from in Helen Drurie's research, she was looking to answer two key questions. So first one, what is it that's standing in the way of lower attainers achieving? And secondly, how do we deepen understanding for high performing pupils? We can answer both of those through the same dimensions of depth. So the first of those you'll see is language and communication. So pupils make sense of and can deepen their understanding through explaining, creating problems, justifying and proving using mathematical language as much as possible. So we want the language to almost be a vehicle, a scaffold for their thinking, and that enables them to deepen understanding. There's like prescriptive practices you can use by making sure you've got full sentences, making sure you've got star words in there, and having that embedded expectation for all pupils to explain. But by making sure we promote this in the classroom, we have that opportunity for all pupils to really deepen and develop reasoning, which is really important to us. The next dimension of depth is conceptual understanding. This links back to that idea of the CPA approach, if you've heard of that. It's quite common now. Pupils, we really want to make sense and deepen their understanding of representing concepts using objects, pictures, ultimately more abstractly with words and symbols and numbers. But really, we're thinking about making connections between different representations and consider what representations stress and ignore, and getting pupils to work fluidly between different representations. And that allows them to build that deeper understanding of the math that they're looking at. And then our third dimension of depth is perhaps the trickiest one to really put your finger on: mathematical thinking. This, in a nutshell, is really getting pupils to think about what is the underlying structure in the maths that they're doing. It might be through looking at opportunities to deepen their understanding by giving examples or perhaps non-examples of things to prove how they know something, but also things like pattern seeking, creating rules of things, looking at representations and thinking about what the commonality is in those representations. At its rawest level, it's essentially teachers asking why all the time to pupils. Can you explain that? Will that always be the case? Can you give me another example of that? And really developing this kind of inquisitive nature within the maths lesson. Now, ultimately, if we're doing all of those different things, then effectively what we're trying to do is give more opportunities for pupils to be able to effectively problem solve. The reason problem solving is in the middle of our dimensions of depth, or you could say is at the heart of our dimension of depth of our program, is that mathematical problem solving is the reason we're doing maths in the first place. All maths is about being able to effectively problem solve. And these are just tools we use to be able to develop those skills in our pupils as much as possible. Okay, so that's the principles of the program. Let's think a little bit more now about some of the things you get in the program to enable that to happen. So going into the program on a more practical level, some of the things that we offer, we are, as much as possible, trying to create an integrated, complete curriculum program. So first of all, we're really proud of our knowledge-rich curriculum and the incredible, careful work that's gone into sequencing it as well as possible. What we're really driving at in the diagram that I'm just creating now is that there's a real unique power that comes from the integration of lots of different components rather than individual components on their own. So all of our resources are kind of collected together to allow teachers to be a lot more coherently thinking about the teaching they're doing. The support that they get is all aligned to be able to allow them to access the resources that we give them and to be able to use them and harness them to be able to be more effective teachers and to ultimately have a higher impact within the learning that they're doing. So in terms of those words that we've used there, integrated, comprehensive, and adaptable, and those are some of the words that really underpin the program, what we really want to be happening is those 3 bullet points that you can see there. We want to see accelerated teacher expertise. This is at all levels, so subject level, topic level, and unit level, but this is really to guide pupils towards subject mastery and is reinforced and embedded through the classroom resources that teachers use every day, and we provide the route to try and address that and to try and guide teachers in it. Ultimately, we want to repurpose teacher time. We know how much teachers are time poor, and there's so much pressure on teachers to do not just maths planning, but every other subject they've got, plus everything else that comes into life as being a teacher. So rather than spending loads and loads of time sourcing different resources, trying to think, are they going to be the right thing? Are they going to be the most effective thing? this allows teachers to trust the resources that they have, so that teachers can really spend their time focusing on responsive teaching, addressing misconceptions, and thinking really carefully about the needs of their pupils within their classroom. And the last bullet point you can see there is proven impact. So this is really thinking about the proven impact that's validated externally, properly evidenced to a high standard. Essentially, it means we've got the credibility, so you know that when you're getting this fully resourced curriculum, that you know that it's going to be fully aligned to the curriculum and is sequenced really carefully to know that if you do this and make sure that we have fidelity in the program, we will have an impact with this program over time. So let's look at that in a slightly different diagram. And I realize that this diagram is a lot of information. So we're going to show you all of it and then break it down into smaller chunks and show you what that looks like in terms of resources. So in the full program offer, you can see here that we've got long-term, unit term, and lesson resources. So these are all the different resources that teachers have in terms of maximizing pupil outcomes. For the rest of this session, we'll have a look at those resources, starting with the long-term ones, which help with planning, assessing, think about pupil starting points. And then we'll have a look at the subject and unit specific planning and resources that you get. Then we'll look at in specific lessons and what the resources look like in specific lessons. We'll also take a look at that curriculum implementation, which is thinking about the support that we give you to be able, as maths leads, to be able to implement the program as effectively as possible. Okay, so let's have a look at the curriculum overview first. We've got lots of different resources which support in really carefully sequencing the program and thinking about how the program effectively develops pupils' knowledge cumulatively over time. So what you can see is up now is a curriculum map from year 2. This just outlines the units of work for the year ahead, and you can see that it's carefully sequenced into different weeks, and we've got really clear progression as we work through. So we might return to number over and over again. You'll see that the first half term is very number heavy. It's really important to get those core basic skills. Beyond that, we've got other longer term planning, such as our program of study. The program of study is a slightly more fleshed out version of the curriculum map, but importantly, it's linking back to those national curriculum objectives so that teachers can have that assured knowledge that everything they're doing in their curriculum maps is linking really carefully to the national curriculum and what they should be teaching their pupils in that year group. Now, moving on to the teacher training and teacher support that teachers have. When you sign up to the program, there's training for every teacher to ensure they're confident in the approach, the structure of the lessons, and how they're going to access the resources really carefully. Teachers have a blended training approach. So you can see on either side of that diagram there, we've got live sessions. So there's an initial live launch, and then you have a face-to-face putting into practice session at the end. So after the live launch, teachers will then embark on their own virtual training course, which consists of different modules where they learn more about the approach and the practicalities of implementing it. And then, as you can see, that's followed with an additional live session, which is really about putting into theory all of the things that they've learned about in those previous modules. It just helps to really consolidate the learning which has gone in those modules before. Now, that isn't it. Once they've done that, teachers aren't left to go off into the abyss and never have any professional development after that. We have professional development for the next 3 years for teachers to really cement their understanding of the program and how to effectively become a stronger maths teacher. So that's broken down into 9 modules over 3 years. That's one module that teachers will access every term. We break these down year by year into different themes. So the first year you can see there is about implementing maths mastery effectively within your classroom. The second year is about developing pedagogy in practice. That's more going back to those dimensions of depth and thinking carefully about what that looks like in a classroom setting. And then lastly, it's about refining and elevating practice. This is when the teachers should be a lot more confident. They've been using the program for 2 years, the resources for 2 years, and it's really refining how they're using it and think about the choices they make within their planning and their implementation. But also really central part of the program is developing your maths leads to make sure that they are leading the program effectively within your school. This is incredibly important to us because it's that maths lead who's going to set the culture in your school of maths and really drive the program. So it's really important that they have all the support. So along with the teacher training that they would do at the start, they also have their own bespoke maths lead training as well. So they get their own live launch, their own induction modules, getting them to think about what it is to be a maths lead and what they'll be doing, and then their own session that they'll go back into the putting into practice with the teachers, and they can think from their own lens about how that's going to affect them. They then have their own specific modules called program leadership modules. Again, these are termly modules that they access, and these almost run parallel to the teacher modules, but specifically for the maths lead to get that maths lead thinking about, okay, my teachers are learning about how to think about effective classroom practice. What can I do in my maths lead role to really support and develop them in that area? So again, broken down 9 modules over 3 years. The first year looking at establishing a team and the vision of maths within your school. Then the second year, developing pedagogy and practice and supporting teachers for that, and then refining practice and increasing the impact. The maths lead modules that you have will be live modules, which will happen over Zoom like we are now, whereas the teacher ones are video asynchronous ones that they can access online. If the maths lead decides they want to run it themselves, in a staff meeting, for example, we also provide the slides online that can be downloaded so the maths lead can pick up those and lead it with teachers, so they don't have to put any extra work into that. That's all there accessible for them. Also have a whole suite of assessment materials that support teachers along the way. We have end of year assessments to support baselining and identifying gaps. Those we have in years 1, 3, 4, and 5. Year 2 and 6, for obvious reasons, don't have those because they're looking more at the SATs-based assessments. We also have some new resources and new links with an organisation called SmartGrade, which is a really, really good way of getting all the data analysis done for you. Essentially, you complete our end of year assessments, then you put them into SmartGrade and it will do all the data analysis and shoot back at you everything you need to know. Here's where your pupils' gaps are. We recommend you using supporting these different areas. So all that difficult work, make sure that your assessments are actually being used and being impactful as much as possible. We've also got term by term assessments. Now, our end of term assessments are cumulative. So your autumn term 1 will cover your autumn objectives. Then your spring assessment will cover autumn and spring. And your summer is your end of year assessment. We have key constructs, which is approximately 10 to 11 statements for each year group about the concepts that they should be covering in that year group. And they come with broken down sub-steps that you can use as teachers to break down and almost like RAG rate how your pupils are doing step by step. And then linked to that, we'll talk a little bit more about it in detail further on in the unit by unit resources, but we've also got diagnostic assessments, which are pre and post unit assessments for every unit that teachers teach. Okay, so that's looking at our longer term planning. Now we're going to think a little bit more detail about the unit plans that we have. So for every unit, there's always going to be some commonality in terms of the resources that you're getting within that unit. So teachers feel really confident in knowing the order and the way that they go about planning. Going back to our induction, in our induction training, we look at the way that we would want teachers to plan. And there's lots of support documents in terms of co-planning about how we get teachers to effectively engage with planning. So looking at some of our unit resources, most important document you can see there is our unit narrative document. The unit narrative document does a lot more than it says on the tin. It does show you the progression of learning, which happens throughout a unit, and it gives you the objectives that you're teaching within a unit. But it also will show you where you might want possible sticky points in that unit, where you may want to use consolidation lessons possibly, or review lessons to make sure pupils are confident in that objective. It might give you some advice on possible ways that you might want to tweak, personalize, or adapt that unit or lesson. For example, there may be a lesson on division, and if you found that lesson particularly tricky, you could possibly break that down into 2 lessons. It might give you some support about how to do that. It'll also look at things like the key representations that you're using within that unit and how you can break that down. It's also got research and video links there to support you as well. Another great tool is our unit tutorial. This is a really good way of seeing everything you've got in the unit narrative, but is a nice little video link that you've got there. It's about 5 to 7 minutes long, and it'll just talk you through that unit, the objectives that you're covering as you go through, any possible misconceptions, key resources, manipulatives you're going to use, and just thinking in general terms about the flow of that unit. That's a really nice one to link in if you've got teaching assistants or additional adults, sending that to them to be able to watch before the unit so they can feel really immersed in that unit before you teach it. It's a really useful strategy as well. So on that line, I did speak about professional development before and saying that all teachers have got professional development, but we don't just look at professional development as something that happens in staff meetings or outside of the planning process. Actually, professional development should be happening all the time. So as a teacher is planning a unit, we try to embed unit professional development videos, which show different concepts and really give you a clear idea of how you should be teaching that concept as a teacher. These are embedded into the unit as you need them. And going back to that unit narrative document, it will highlight when you should look at them and access them. Our teachers who use these are always really pleased and say that it's one of the best features of the program because it develops and gives them confidence prior to teaching something they're not sure about or a little bit hazy about, perhaps haven't taught it for a year or two, just to make sure, oh, okay, this is how I'm using the manipulatives. This is how the representations go. I feel confident in modeling this concept now. I spoke before a little bit about co-planning and how important it is. We advocate co-planning as much as possible. We've got lots of planning documents that really support maths leads and possibly other people who might be dropping into co-planning sessions with teachers about how do you engage in planning, what sorts of questions should you be answering to make sure you get the most out of your planning process within PPA sessions. However, we realise also that not every teacher, if you're in a one-form entry school, is going to be able to co-plan all the time. So these documents as well are a really good structural tool for perhaps less experienced teachers who might be planning on their own, to give them that support network, to give them those prompts so that they can still go through that intellectual preparation effectively as well. We have lots of differentiated resources and lots of videos which go with this as well. So support videos about how to differentiate resources effectively. And we've got things like questioning stems to think about how you promote mathematical thinking and plan effectively opportunities for things like questioning into your lessons as well. So lots of different prompts to use there. Now, I mentioned pre and post unit assessments before. Here's just an example of what they look like. The pre-unit assessments are a really important tool for teachers before they go into their planning to know exactly where their pupils are. It'll be a short assessment of perhaps 6 to 10 questions, looking at the prerequisite knowledge that pupils need prior to that unit. It'll be multiple choice. You do it with the pupils, complete it. We've got a platform that you can use that they then get the data analysis back to them and tell them exactly which people struggle with certain concepts. Take that into your planning meeting and it helps inform your planning to make sure that the teaching that you're doing is really informed to your pupils' needs. You get things like response signposts, which help to show you what possible misconceptions there were. So if you know that a certain group of pupils got something wrong, you can have a look at this and go, okay, maybe I need to reteach this lesson. So it will give them the advice on which lesson to work to. So it's just that support network for teachers. Your post-unit assessment is afterwards and goes back through all the objectives that you've taught within that unit and gives you that opportunity to go, okay, some of my pupils didn't understand this, maybe I need to go through it, drop it into a maths meeting or consolidate that understanding as we go, just assessing the learning that's happened along the way. Okay, now the third strand of resources that we haven't looked at yet, we've gone through long-term and unit, we'll now have a quick look at the lesson resources. So some of the things that we get is there is a one-page lesson guide for every lesson, which talks teachers through every stage of our 6-part lesson, possible questions they might need, how to effectively model, careful prompts about how to make sure they engage with that lesson effectively. Now, the 6-part lesson is something which is really unique to Maths Mastery. 6 parts being your do now, which is like a short intro, getting pupils ready for learning, reviewing things before. Your new learning, which is introducing a new concept and really careful modeling. So I do, we do, getting pupils involved, collaborative modeling along the way, and getting pupils exploring a new concept. Your talk task, which is almost a protected time for pupils to be able to work on what you've done in the new learning, but really importantly, explore the concept that they've been looking at, using vocabulary meaningfully in full sentences. It's a dedicated part of the lesson for pupils to explicitly practice using the language. We've then got our develop learning part of the lesson. And this is really important for pupils then either to consolidate what's happened in that talk task or to develop their learning moving forward through perhaps making it more complex or looking at it from a slightly different way. So it might not be put like developing the learning up, but actually expanding the learning. So perhaps looking at, if I looked at it with a bead string in the first part of the lesson, a concept, I might then look at it using a number line, what's the same, what's different, making connections between those concepts. So we're exploring and developing them through those different concepts. And then our independent task gives us that opportunity for pupils to complete the task. When we say independent, we don't necessarily mean on their own, but we mean independent of the teacher. And then, as you would expect normally, our plenary is that chance to celebrate the learning and to review the learning that's happened, perhaps bridge it to that next lesson. Importantly, you can see there, the reason we use that 6-part lesson is we think it's a really nice vehicle to use because it provides opportunities for the dimensions of depth to be able to be promoted and to come through as much as possible for both teachers and the pupils to expose language and to practice the language, conceptual understanding and mathematical thinking. Now, thinking about these 3 dimensions of depth, I just want to give you an opportunity to have a look at a dimension of depth in action and a chance for you to not hear my voice for a few moments. So I'm going to give you a few moments now to have a look at the dimensions of depth in action. We've just picked one and we've decided to focus on language and communication because it's a nice one to look at first. I believe there has just been a link put into the chat which you can access to find that video, or if you've got your phone in front of you, you could also just use that QR code to have a look at that video as well. It's around 4.5 minutes long, so I'm just going to put a timer onto my watch about 4.5 minutes and then we'll come back together and carry on. that should have given us enough time to watch that video, and hopefully that gave you a little bit of a feel of what we're talking about in terms of developing language communication, opportunities from using those key language, having that star vocabulary, and then building that up into sentence stem structure, ultimately to those examples you saw in the year 5 examples where pupils can really accurately start reasoning about the maths that they're doing and really explore it in that and think about the deeper understanding of what they're seeing and really challenging each other on concepts. Okay, we're now going to move on to some of the other resources in terms of lesson structure that we provide. So thinking about that idea, we provide task sheets where appropriate. In terms of what we're looking at, we try to provide adapted task sheets to show teachers what the same task might look like if it was given more scaffolding or adapted to really support and challenge even more. So if we look at an example that we've got here, we've got perhaps one example of a task sheet, but then we might have slightly different task sheets there, and you can see there's a lot more structure in terms of thinking of the use of deans, use of representations, and the language structure to support them. Or we might have a perhaps slightly less scaffolded example, really thinking about a little bit more reasoning, looking at promoting mathematical thinking as well. Now, just because we do provide lots of different adapted versions and differentiated versions, we are not trying to promote this as three-way differentiation. What you should look at it is we're providing a suite of different options for teachers so that all teachers can make sure that all pupils can access that objective by looking at how much scaffolding, how much support they might need to be able to do it depending on the needs of their pupils. So it's just as we think about teacher workload, teachers aren't having to recreate or tweak tasks because they've got that platform of lots of different tasks there for them. It might be that all your pupils start on the task which has more challenge, or it might be all your pupils start on the task sheet which needs a little bit more support. Likewise, it might be that for teachers, they decide to not use the task sheet at all. That is totally up to them. We do provide lesson guides, which are available in PowerPoint, and these match the lesson guides that you saw before, and these are the interactive whiteboard slides. There's interactive whiteboard slides which go with your lesson guides, and they mirror and match up with each other really carefully to make sure it's obvious what you're teaching and when you're teaching it. Within our PowerPoints as well, we will try and provide in the notes section of the PowerPoints the links and the text that is from the lesson guide to make sure that you've got that easy connection to be made as well for your teachers. So the part that we haven't looked in terms of our component chart is on the left-hand side. We haven't really thought about our curriculum implementation. We know that it can be super challenging when you take on any sort of new interventional program within a school, and there can be a huge level of challenge with that. So we don't expect you as a school just to pick it up and go and get on with it. We want to be there to be able to support you in your journey and to try and make sure that you're implementing it as effectively as possible. So we provide implementation guidance on our platform, which can be accessed by maths leads and SLT at any point. We've got that induction training to get everyone set up as much as possible. But we also provide in-school support and development sessions, which are remote sessions that happen. So for people who are part of our tailored package, they have half-termly support from a dedicated development lead, someone such as myself, who will go in and have 2 face-to-face visits, as well as 4 remote development sessions, really bespoke and focused on the needs of that school to make sure that we're supporting that maths lead, supporting that school to be able to implement the program effectively. At the end of the year, we'll then have an annual briefing to ensure you stay really informed about the developments that are happening internally at Maths Mastery and where we're going next in our journey. So just some other things in terms of the program and some inclusions that you get when you sign up to the program. One of our USPs is something called maths meetings. Now, maths meetings are something that happens outside, separate to the maths lesson, and they're a 10 to 15 minute session, which is really focused on developing pupil fluency, developing pupils' opportunities to look at things like arithmetic practice, but also consolidating learning as much as possible. So they're daily opportunities really to build up fluency as much as possible, looking at recall, looking at retention of knowledge. You might highlight missed learning or really key in closing gaps as much as possible. We know from our partner schools that actually it's part of our program that pupils enjoy most. And actually, if the teacher's doing it well, it's the part that the teachers enjoy the most. Normally, it's really fast paced, but we do provide some structure to it as well. It can be quite fluid depending on what the teacher wants to do and how they want to organize it. We provide for every year group some sets of objectives and some structure in terms of what should be covered year group by year group and then term by term in your maths meeting. So these are sets of objectives. Teachers might print these off and almost tally them every time they're covering them. But on top of this, you might also be covering things that you've picked up in your pre and post unit assessments or your end of unit assessment data and really dropping that in to make sure we're halting that forgetting curve, giving pupils opportunity to constantly revisit topics which don't get covered often, or they've been a little bit like sticky points within the units as you've been teaching. It can be really tricky to explain what a maths meeting is. So the best way of us getting a feel for it is to see it in action. Now, the video clip we're about to watch is actually about 14 minutes long. We don't have 14 minutes, but the link that you've got there, and I think someone's just about to pop into the chat. Thank you very much. That link, you can watch it at your own leisure, the whole length of it, to get a feel of what the maths meetings are. And there's a QR code there if you've got your phone out to be able to watch it as well. I'm just going to give you perhaps about 2 or 3 minutes now just to have a look through and watch the start of that meeting, and then I'll just kind of halt us. I'll do a 2-minute and then I'll get going to finish off the session. So about 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll come back together. I'm going to pause this there just so we've got enough time to make sure that we finish on time. I know that wasn't too long to have a look at that video clip, but hopefully you've got a feel for what maths meetings look like, and showing a couple of minutes gave you a better idea than me trying to explain it. So you should have seen that really fast-paced approach, looking at quite short, sharp segments, but focused on number, focused on retrieval practice, all pupils doing, practicing kind of all those different things in terms of developing the fluency. By all means, do go back through that and have a look. And if you want to see more clips of maths meeting in action, get in contact with us. We can definitely find you some more examples to give you a feel of different year groups, perhaps Key Stage 1 or reception as well. Okay, let's just move us on slightly. So another thing that we have in terms of additional things is our Rate to Progress interventions. So our Rate to Progress intervention program is a part of the Maths Mastery program, and you get this when you sign up. You get all the access to all the different things. It's focusing on core curriculum content that can deliver a quality output when delivered through a lower skilled staff member. In short, anyone can deliver our Rate to Progress interventions because they've got so much support in terms of all the resources that you get to make sure that it can be delivered really, really effectively. So additional adults, TAs, or teachers could be delivering these, and they're just short, sharp intervention sessions that focus on the Rate to Progress statements, which were released in 2020. There's a different intervention for every Rate to Progress statement. So for each one, you'll get the diagnostic placement quizzes, which are short quizzes you can give pupils to see where their gaps might be and which interventions they might need, although you may not need to use those if you've already identified where pupils' gaps are. You've got over 140 pupil-facing videos, so that's a short video that when you run the intervention, you would play with the pupils and then pause it for when the teacher on the video tells you to, and you can access it with the TA and pupils all accessing using the manipulatives. And there's lots of structural activities taken along the way. These are done through a PowerPoint slide, and also support for teachers to have to be able to lead it comprehensively. So it's got everything you need there. It's a really, really useful resource to have, and a really comprehensive resource. It was actually highly commended in the Teach First Primary Awards in 2022. So that's a really useful resource that you get free when you join the program. So thinking about that, we're going to have a quick look at program support and pricing. So as part of the tailored package, schools, as I mentioned before, receive 2 face-to-face visits that are completely tailored to your needs at any point. So you will have a development lead. I think that's meant to look like me. So your development visit, you'll have 2 face-to-face development visits, and that is really tailored on whatever your school needs. So initially it might be things like learning walks, supporting that maths lead, but it might also go into things like staff training sessions. It might be working through co-planning with different teachers. Whatever you need, we can work out what that should be and tailor it for that and make it bespoke as possible. You'll also get 4 remote development sessions across the school year that again will also be tailored as well. Now, on top of that, the really important thing about having that dedicated development lead is there at the end of the phone for you or at the end of an email. You're not just emailing an info box somewhere. You're emailing the person who will get back to you for whatever the question might be. I quite often get schools asking about certain units, certain lessons. What approach would you use for this? Can you link in a video, which is really useful to that? And it's just having that tailored support of someone there to support you along the way. So think about the pricing options that you've got. Now, based on the Key Stage 1 evaluation that are the EEF completed, the EEF are actually subsidizing our pricing structure and giving us a really generous subsidy for schools that sign up for Key Stage 1. So this subsidy that you can see here is guaranteed for 2 years. So the first 2 years of the program, you'll get that reduced rate for reception in Key Stage 1. This is a huge discount, it's about 80%. So that means a whole school for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 can sign up to Maths Mastery for just under £3,000. Standard pricing without the EF subsidy might be £5,500 for Key Stage 1, and for the whole school might be £7,000. So it's a huge discount going forward. We do also have some special extra discounts on top of that at the moment. So additional Key Stage 2 discounts if you sign up before Easter, so before the 28th of February, so that's next Tuesday, you'll get 25% discount on Key Stage 2 price, and then 15% extended on until the 31st of March. So if you do access that, that gives you a good run up to get all your teachers informed and get them prepared, ready for next year's resources. Now, if you want to find out more information about this, please do get in touch. You can see there's a nice little dinosaur linked QR code there that you can go to easily access, find out more information. If you want to email partnerships, then we can arrange a call for you or answer any queries that you might have, or if you want more information, or absolutely do give us a call to book in a call as well. That is it from me, and I can please say give you about 3 or 4 minutes back, but I'm also happy to hang around and answer any questions if you do have any. The chat is still open, so if you do have any queries or questions, feel free to post anything onto the chat. Thank you very much for your time today. Hope you have a great evening. Okay, we've had a couple of questions in the chat. Do we follow White Rose? No, we're separate to White Rose. So our program is different to White Rose. We follow very similar principles to White Rose. So it's still a mastery approach in that we're trying to promote. So you can go back to those dimensions of depth that we showed you at the start. We're trying to promote those different things, but in terms of resources, it's a different program resource. Comparing to White Rose will give you a lot of structure. We actually provide all of the lesson resources and that full curriculum resource package that goes along with it. So we do actually provide more, and we've also got a professional development that you wouldn't get in White Rose as well. So there's a lot more available for you to support your teachers. In terms of supporting mixed age classes, Rose, it is a case of in mixed age classes, it can be tricky. We do provide lots of support, and we work with mixed age classrooms of making sure that first off, that we look at the 2 year groups that year group's teaching and think about how our curriculum map is going to map up together. So trying to link in the 2 year groups and make sure they've got that core learning. Where possible, we're looking for units that sync together. So addition and subtraction, how can we make sure that we give opportunities to extend it? And we try and use those where possible. But if there aren't those opportunities, we then look and think about what can we do in terms of mixed age planning to make sure that we give teachers all the support they need to make sure that they can teach an objective to certain year groups and another objective to another year group. In short, it can be tricky. It takes lots of thought process and planning time, but it can be done if you're carefully plotting out the mixed age planning objectives. In terms of Leicester, I'm not quite sure. I wouldn't be able to tell you this second whether we have schools in Leicester joining us at the moment. We do have quite a lot of schools in the Midlands. I'm not sure Leicester specific. And then you missed the start of the meeting. Do you have interventions? Yes. So the interventions program that you've got there is part of the whole package that you would get. If you wanted just the interventions on their own, we do also sell the intervention package uniquely, separately to them as well. The interventions is not the PowerPoints provided by the NCTM, no. The interventions are the Ready to Progress interventions, which is based on Ready to Progress statements, which were released by the DFE in 2020. Can we support more than 2 year groups in a class? Yes, you could do. It would take even more careful planning in terms of the objectives and how you're going to lay out setting out those objectives. I think it's really careful thinking about the input that you've got to give to those pupils. If possible, I would look at split input there. I don't think you can do one input in a classroom in a year group at a lesson to cover 3, 4, 5, 6. I think you'd be looking at splitting that input to make sure that you might give input to year 3 and 4, and then they're working on a task while you then give some input to year 5 and 6, and you almost stagger that approach as you work through the lesson and work through a week to be able to work with those. Obviously, if you've got additional adults to help you with that, then you can break up that classroom and you can give some input, and then additional adults can support those extra pupils.
Hi. Do you know if you're going to send the recording to us?
Hi there. We should absolutely be able to send out the
Yes.
recording afterwards. Yes,
Yes, we are.
Speaking to me. Yes, we'll send out the recording afterwards to everyone who attended.
Brilliant, thank you, because I think I ended up missing quite a bit, really.
Okay, no worries.
Forgot what the time was. It's because we've got half term, you see, so I forgot what the time was.
Oh, lucky you. Most people already have their half term, so yeah, lucky you. Enjoy it anyway.
Been doing maths all day. Not enjoying it. Not enjoying doing maths all day.
Wrong
Anyway,
answer. You should say
wrong
you enjoy.
answer. I was just going to say that. Should have not said that.
Don't worry. Okay, have a great half term.
Anthony, I was going to ask, I work for Norfolk County Council actually as a local authority. I'm an education advisor, which is sort of partially why I've come along, because I've got lots of schools asking about your programme, and obviously I don't know the answers, so I wanted to come along. Would you do these types of sessions for like a group of schools? I know this is obviously schools can all sign up to this sort of thing, but if there was one specifically put on, would you do one specifically for a group of schools in an area? Is that something that you guys would do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly the type of thing that we would do. So I think the best way to go forward is if we were to send you an email, Rose, and get a little bit more information from you, and we might be able to organise that session and then get it really bespoke for your for those groups of schools to come along. And we could also find out a little bit more about the unique setting of those schools, and so we can tailor the input that we give a little bit more for you.
Yeah, okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Can I just quickly ask last question? I have navigated your site. It seems to me that there's so many bits to kind of work out, navigate for teachers to then prepare the planning from. Is that the case? Because I'm trying to reduce that time. And it seemed to me that there's so many bits of material that you have to kind of work out where to go, what to take.
So one, yes, there are lots of resources and there's lots of things there. The reason we do the induction training, and one of the modules in the induction training, is essentially just focused on this is how we plan effectively. So we'll map and like almost walk teachers through, let's look at a unit together. We'd first look at this, then we look at this together. So we'd look at our diagnostic assessments and our unit narrative to know exactly where our pupils are, map out the unit. Then we go into the individual lessons and have a look at the individual lesson interactive whiteboard along with this. We look at that together, and then how does that fit in with that? Then we look at our post-unit assessment. So it kind of maps out all of that. Some of the other stuff in terms of the professional development is more focused on what the maths lead is going to be doing and how the maths lead is going to support those teachers over a longer period of time.
Okay, thank you.